What if the way you've been taught to lead is the very thing driving your team away? Fear-based leadership isn't just outdated, it's toxic. But what replaces it? Meet Haley Anthony, a combat veteran turned leadership coach who's rewriting the rules with empathy, honesty, and human connection. Traditional leadership models often rely on fear. Haley Anthony believes there's a better way. In this interview, she's going to talk about transforming leadership development through empathy and understanding, helping executives lead with inspiration rather than intimidation.
A lot of times young leaders come in and they believe, and I say they, but it was also myself as a young leader, came in and believed that, the way to get people to do things is motivation, but not necessarily intrinsic motivation, which I can get into that, but it was more motivation around when you do something wrong, you're going to be punished. What motivates them? Everyone says, oh, it's money, it's salary, but most of the time there's something a lot deeper there.
Traditional leadership models often rely on fear, but Haley Anthony believes there's a better way. So in this interview, she's going to talk about transforming leadership development through empathy and understanding, helping executives lead with inspiration rather than intimidation. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And thanks for being here. You've done a lot of things, and from my notes, it says your coaching philosophy emphasizes getting away from that fear-based leadership. Everybody knows about having the boss that cracks the whip and it has everyone afraid of them. Could you explain to the audience what you mean by that and why it's so important in today's workplace?
Traditional models, especially, I come from a generation too, and I'm a lot older than I look. I'll just put it out there right now, where we go to work, we do what our boss tells us to do. And if we don't, we start to go down a path to be removed or terminated. And a lot of times young leaders come in and they believe, and I say they, but it was also myself as a young leader, came in and believed that the way to get people to do things is motivation, but not necessarily intrinsic motivation, which I can get into that, but it was more motivation around when you do something wrong, you're going to be punished. But it was a punishment mentality. And unfortunately, that culture still exists heavily in small businesses. It's been my experience. And as we grow as leaders, we become more equipped with better tools. But I also started to find my passion and my life purpose, which was leaving a lasting, powerful, and positive impact on the lives of others. And I do that through leading teams and turning teams around and doing it with minimal turnover, minimal drama. And people are like, how do you do that? I do that because we get in and we have a people, process, technology model. And from a people perspective, it's really diving in and getting to know your team, your people for who they are as humans at their core, what motivates them. Everyone says, oh, it's money, it's salary. Okay, yes, we have to pay our bills, absolutely. But most of the time, there's something a lot deeper there. And as a leader, when you get to know your people to that level, being able to have crucial conversations with them and being able to inspire them differently to accomplish goals for an organization is much more fulfilling for not only yourself, but the team as well.
So true. So are there any common signs that a leader might be relying on fear and intimidation tactics, maybe without even realizing?
Yes, there's a lot of common signs. Oftentimes, this doesn't even come out until we do some kind of employee engagement survey. That's usually when I'm getting called in. We have a leader that a bunch of stuff got said on an employee engagement survey. And we come in and it's them versus the employee, and it's not them being cohesive and working together. So there's signs there with the employee engagement survey. The other pieces are when you have a lot of things going wrong and no one's telling you. You're just in your office doing your own thing, catching up on your email, and the world is burning down outside your office and no one wants to come tell you. That's a sign. And sometimes you have high performers, God bless them, who will be brave and courageous, and they will actually say, hey, you need to know this, and I'm afraid to tell you. Those are all kind of signs and symptoms that you have a culture that needs some love and attention.
It makes sense. I remember, my gosh, probably 25 years ago now, I went to work at this small company as their CTO, and strangely, because they didn't really know how to set up their hierarchy, I reported to the VP of marketing.
Yeah.
Over time, I started meeting with the CEO, who I should have been reporting to, and explaining to him how this guy was just like, everything was do this or else, do that or else. And I had no idea. And rather than talk to the guy about it, he just reassigned me to being reporting to him. And then the next person that complained, he just reassigned them to someone else. And he just kept moving the people around, but not taking care of the problem. And it literally got to the point where like the marketing department was him and a revolving door of people that would come stay for 2 weeks, be assigned to somebody else, stay for 2 weeks, be assigned to somebody else. And it always bothered me that all these people had the guts to speak to somebody about what they were experiencing, but no one seemed to have the guts to deal with it. And part of the problem was he was one of the 3 owners of the company. So of course it was a sensitive issue. What ended up happening was he broke off from our company to create a similar business, but we delivered food. He did a takeout system. So it's just a same idea. Well, company didn't last for the same exact reason. Nobody wanted to stay working for him. So I think your last point there about people, the whole world's burning down outside and you don't even know because no one's telling you, it's very relevant. So it brings
you brought up a valid point there, the avoidance, right? An avoidance tactic of leadership. So we know there's a problem. So we're just going to move it over here. But the problem is the problem's still there, and it actually exacerbates the situation and makes it far worse. And that's when companies start to see their bottom line dip. Because if your culture isn't healthy, it will impact your bottom line. Maybe not tomorrow, but I guarantee it will, because the cost of retraining new employees as you have that revolving door. And that's really when I have these conversations with executives. And believe it or not, I feel sometimes some of my smaller companies do a little bit better in this area when we have these conversations. But my mid-sized companies tend to, it's just culture. It's people. This is normal. Start talking to them in the form of dollars. All of a sudden, I didn't realize this could really impact my company like that. And then we start to really see the changes, because if you don't have that stakeholder backing from the executive level, you're not going to be successful in implementing a new culture.
So you talk about a lot about the importance of empathy in leadership.
Yeah.
How do you define empathy within the context of leading a team, and how important do you think it is to success?
I love that question. I get asked this a lot. So we talk about empathy. Empathy is really being able to put yourself in your employees' shoes and walk in them. And I've had managers who I don't know how to do their job. It has nothing to do with the technical, tactical piece. It has everything to do with the emotional piece. If you felt fear, you can empathize with them. You can walk in their shoes on what it's like to be afraid of something or someone. I've had autistic employees that are on the spectrum. And I'm not autistic. I'm not on the spectrum at all. However, I had one of them come to me and say, I don't like being in your office for our one-on-ones. I feel closed and it doesn't feel good and it's scary. So they use the word scary. So I know what it's like to be scared and afraid. And I said, you know what? I hear you. From now on, our one-on-ones, and this is when I was in healthcare, we worked next to a park. I said, we're going to go out for a walk in the park. I always see you out there during your breaks. Does that work? He's, yes, that works beautifully. So I would bring my notepad and we would go for a walk. We got our steps in. It was a good day for both of us. But being able to sit there and go, okay, he's afraid of being in my office. What can I shift in my leadership to support him better, to show up better for these conversations? Because he would bring a lot more to the conversation when he felt safe. And this really goes into psychological safety and creating that for your team.
No, that makes a lot of sense, because I can recall like working with different team members, and there's some that like, there was a coffee shop down below us, and there's some who just like to have a cup of coffee and talk. And it's almost like it was their pacifier. It calmed them down. And so why not meet them where they're at and go have the cup of coffee?
Yeah.
There's no rule that says the one-on-one has to be in your office.
Yes. We call it go to Gemba in the Lean Six Sigma world, and going to where the work is performed. I learned more walking around in my employees' environment about what the heck was going on than I did when they were in my office. And just being able to be present with them in the places where they're at and experiencing the issues, it makes a vast difference in how you're going to lead them.
It's like I used to hear I'd run a help desk that was 24 hours a day. And we, at the time, Nextel phones were the big thing, right? Because they had the walkie-talkie feature. And so we would forward the help desk line after hours to that phone. And about once every 6 or 7 weeks, I'd take the phone for a week. And my CEO kept saying, such a waste of time for someone who's paid as much as you to answer a phone. And I'm like, yeah, what you don't know is I'm finding out an awful lot about what's going on because they get you on the phone and they're like, Mike, is that you? Yeah. Oh, I got to tell you what's going on. And they spill the beans on things. They're not going to come to your office and approach you about it. They're not calling you on the phone to talk about it. But because they happen to have a problem and you answered the phone, suddenly it's, here's the problem that I'm having. But hey, well, I've got you here. Let me tell you this and this. And I said, so I find it to be an extremely valuable use of my time. And it helps me guide my team on what they're doing right and what they're not doing right, because their customers telling me, oh, well, the last time the guy told me he was going to do this and I'm still waiting, that kind of thing.
Yep.
I find meeting people where they are in pretty much any aspect of business to be a winner. It's just always, it always seems to be a win.
Yep. Absolutely.
So what do you advise leaders? Like, what are some steps that leaders can take when they're transitioning from that fear-based approach to one of inspiration and empathy?
Man, that is, if there's no clear-cut answer on that, and actually it's not just the leaders, it's the team that needs to take some responsibility as well. And that's what I love about employee engagement surveys is, you know, employees, we'll just, and I'm an employee too, we'll just let our leaders have it on that thing. Oh, it's anonymous. I'm going to say whatever I want and we're going to get sassy. But what they don't realize is when we come in and go, okay, let's review the employee engagement survey. Yeah, there's stuff the manager has to improve, but guess what? The team is just as much responsible for creating that environment as the leader. And if the leader is willing to meet them halfway, it's amazing to me how there are low performers who have become toxic in the environment and building that structure of, oh, we have a bad leader. And that's what they hang their hat on as to how they continue their behavior. So it's a lot of change, not only from the leadership perspective. So when we start to shift the leadership, it's going to be having a group discussion. And then we also follow up with one-on-ones. And when I say we as a leader, put yourself in a leadership role. If you're leading a team right now that's stuck and you want to shift it to be more open and create more of a fun culture, I encourage you to take a survey with them or even a 360-degree sensing session where HR can help you with that usually. And you get this feedback. And what I love to do is we do a group session first because some employees do better in a group session where they're like, okay, I'm going to raise my hand because I feel psychological safety because my peers are here to witness it. And so they'll raise their hand, they'll say what they want to say. And I'm going to tell you as a leader, you better have some thick skin because if you created a mess, it's time to hear about your mess. And it creates some humility and it's all intrinsic. This is all internal to you in regards to being able to show up and create space for this and in a mindset to receive feedback. Do not get defensive. And I encourage you, the questions that you ask, to start with how or start with what, not how or what can I do to change this? How do you feel weak this? And how do we move forward, right? These are questions you're going to ask, not why do you think that? Because why causes people to raise up. So you're going to go through that. Then you're going to do it one-on-one with them. You're going to have one-on-ones with employees. And I encourage you to make them no more than 30 minutes. And I encourage you to allow the employee to end it if they want to end it early. It is not mandatory either. And they come in and they sit down and I'm going to tell you, you're going to learn more about the employees who don't show up than you do the ones that do. Because the ones that don't show up, you now know who you need to hone in and really develop a relationship with. And you're going to start creating goals around that. Then also, once you get the feedback there, you're going to come up with next steps. But here's where I don't want you to get hung up, leaders. It is not all your responsibility. So let's shift to the employee side. During that group session, your employees are going to own some stuff too. And I encourage you to tie it into their annual goals as a team. Hey, now it's one thing if it's something like financial, that's out of their control. But if there are processes that need to be developed, leader, you're not supposed to be developing those processes. Maybe your teams develop it and you approve it, right? So now you're holding each other accountable. There should be an equal weight there. You guys should both be all of you should be coming to the table to drive things forward. And then also round with your employees. So going to Gemba, going to where that work is, and that's important. These are just a few steps. Honestly, every team is different. And some are, I've gone into teams and there's some things that are illegal and unethical going on. And so that shifts the approach abruptly.
Yeah. It's interesting because in my own coaching business, I teach a process called PACE, and the P stands for purposeful alignment. And when we talk about that with the leaders, I get to the point where I tell them, you want them to tell you when you've done something they didn't like. And you want them to tell you if you made a mistake that they had to clean up. You got to let them tell you that. And I've had so many leaders say to me, why would I want my staff to tell me when I did something wrong? And I said, let me ask you this. Why do you tell them when they do something wrong? And he says, so that it doesn't happen again and that they do a better job. Yeah, that's why you want them to tell you when you've done something wrong. So you will do a better job in the future. And I think it's something that leaders forget as they come up through the ranks, is that you have to be held accountable too. Just because you're the leader doesn't mean you get to dictate. And I think even that, like we talked and I joked in the beginning about cracking the whip and whatever, but the reality is you don't have to necessarily be a tyrant to still be using fear-based tactics. You can be using fear-based tactics by, you don't dare tell me what I did wrong. And it makes people afraid to talk to you. I always encourage open communication, because it's when you establish that with your team, then you know that when you're talking to them, they're telling you the truth. It's like when you're married and you have a spouse that you trust and you love and you care about, they're going to tell you the truth. And they might even be the only person in the world who's going to tell you the truth, but they're going to tell you the truth. So they're the most beneficial to bounce a certain thing off of. I think it's something powerful component that leaders are missing. But one of the things I've noticed about that is that they're always afraid to change their style, right? Because they're just used to that fear-based tactics. So how do you help your clients overcome resistance and make it a successful transition?
It's a great question. And I feel like we're also really honing in on overt leaders that are overt. Avoidance is another tactic too. So I have plenty of leaders that are just avoiding it. Oh, there's some, we're just going to just pretend it's not wrong until it escalates and explodes. So going back to your question, ask the question again, because I want to make sure I cover both areas.
Sure. I said that leaders don't like to change their style, especially if they've been using the tactics for a long time. So how do you get them to overcome resistance and make the transition successful?
Yeah, I'm trying to cover everyone who could be listening to this. So to overcome that transition and be successful, I encourage them to really they need to do some self-assessments on themselves, is really how it is. They need to sit down and they need to take all the feedback they've received and really tie it into A, where it's come from, and then B, where they want to go, and tie it into their goals. And then I encourage them to understand, and this really ties into more coaching work, is life purpose, because it plays a huge role in that as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think it's a great approach. But like, how about this? What are some common misconceptions that you often encounter about leadership, especially maybe let's talk about the balance between authority and empathy?
I got you. I'm in charge. I make the decisions. I moved into this role for power. And this is what I actually teach. I was hired to do this role. I'm expected to be an expert at it already coming into it. And they're going to find out I'm not. And that's where that fear comes in, is that they're afraid of being seen or found out. And in reality, they're human, just like their employees. And we all have needs. And if we can approach it from that perspective of, I need to be seen. Hey, team, I need you guys to understand, I don't know all this, and I'm not going to know all of it by tomorrow. So I'm going to lean on some of you all to be my experts here. And when I have those conversations with leaders who are really struggling with imposter complex, and it's coming out as that because someone is questioning them or anything like that, I ask them, I say, empathize with your employee. How would you feel if your boss did that to you? Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I would never do that to my boss. It's usually the common answer. So then I start getting curious and I start asking the what and how questions myself. So what does that stem from? What does that need for control stem from? what is that power of trying to drive things forward and not letting anyone question you? Where does that stem from? And I'm going to be very honest with everyone on this call. People do not pay me to be their friend. They pay me to tick them off. I make more people mad than I do happy. However, that anger causes a shift in transition. And so as I start to dig on this a little bit, we get into that imposter complex, we get into the understanding of what self-image, self-esteem, and identity are, how they're tied together and how they drive us. We also find out it's deep-rooted in shame. And there's shame there of, I should not have gotten this job. Someone else should have. I just applied and they think I'm great. And we get a lot of tears and a lot of falling apart. But once we get there and a recognition, we understand empathy usually, because that's when we start talking about feelings. And then we're able to start making that shift to the direction we need to make as leaders.
Do you think that maybe businesses have a bigger role to play in the problem than many of them think? Because what I'm thinking about here is leaders get promoted through the ranks. But at what point, and how do I explain this? So leaders are getting pushed up through the ranks, promoted one step at a time, but at no point do they work on the emotional side of leadership. It's always like you said, it's always about the execution. And I know how to do this job, so I'm the leader. Do you think maybe businesses hold a larger piece of the role in this problem because they didn't train people correctly?
Yeah, they absolutely do. That's actually my favorite question to ask a group of people, or even just one person. How do you feel about that? I think, you told me what you thought, but what was my question? How do I feel? The F word no one likes.
Yeah, people have good feelings. Yeah.
How do you feel? And once I get them shifted into that mode of how they show up, and that's always the first question I ask is, hey, what's been going on? And they'll tell me, how do you feel? I feel defeated. I feel frustrated. I feel overwhelmed. Hey, every now and again, I feel like I'm winning. I feel like I'm on track. That's usually towards the end of our sessions. So yes, I honestly feel our companies neglect it because we associate feelings and those types of things oftentimes with therapy. And it's not. Yeah. It's not therapy. I don't give diagnosis. I'm not a therapist. I'm board certified through the National Board of Certified Counselors. However, I am not a therapist. We taught all of my coach training, which is ICF credentialed to the International Coaching Federation, has a overarching ethics that we follow, and none of it requires diagnosis. And all of our training requires digging into feelings. Every bit of it. And as a matter of fact, Leidos, the company I work for that I'm contracted for, has organizational development departments with PCC credentialed coaches just like me. These larger companies are catching on. The Navy is catching on. And so they're starting to catch on to the trend that yes, there's a difference between therapy and there's a difference between coaching. And they're realizing the feelings piece of it is heavy. The Air Force Academy employs coaches and therapists. Their coaches are right there with the cadets as they're going through the hard stuff and they're asking those how and what questions. And when it tips into the therapy world of trauma or childhood or diagnosing, they get referred immediately. And so companies, I think the larger ones are catching on, our smaller companies need to start catching on too, to start training on those soft skills. Because we as leaders, if we can show up and understand our feelings, because we need to understand our crap, feel our crap, and not lose our crap. That's really what I try to get to with my clients. Once we start getting there, I think these companies are going to be places everyone wants to work for.
Like you mentioned imposter syndrome. And I feel one of the things leaders need to remember is they were put in a position for a reason. Somebody thought they would work in that role. And I'm sure they could work in that role, but they don't need to know everything that every employee does. It's why you hire a team. I actually think it's a benefit to somebody if they've got like a 10-person team and they only know 2 of the people's roles, like how to do it. It's almost a benefit because then they're not going to micromanage the other people.
Nailed it.
I think it's almost better to have somebody who doesn't know everything about everything. And I think leaders need to realize that you can lead people who you don't know how to do their job because there's a certain way to interact with other human beings to get them to be motivated to do things that you want them to do. There's nothing, I'll never forget being in a situation where we had a network engineer who Our company was based in Orange County, California, and he was living in Spokane, Washington. And so about every 2 to 3 months or as needed, because he'd have projects that he'd need to come down, he would come down to the office and work when he'd have to work on the physical server. I don't remember why, but the first 2 times he came, he stayed at my house because they had problems booking him a room or something. But then on the 3rd time, the HR person said, oh, Mike, and his name is also Mike as well, I'm going to book you a hotel. He said, no, I'd rather stay with Mike. And so I asked him about it when he came, and he said, we get to talk as we go to work and as we go home, we get to talk about a few things, and I'm able to tell you how I'm feeling about what's going on. And when I heard that word, how I'm feeling, it gave me goosebumps because he's right. We were making a connection and at the same time helping him do better at what we were doing. It was amazing, but it was nice to hear. But I have an interesting question for you. I like to throw some strange ones out once in a while, and we're starting to run out of time. So I wanted to throw this one in there. So if you could write an empathy manifesto for leaders, what would be the first 3 rules?
What would be the first 3 roles?
Rules.
Oh, rules. It's kind of like the Agile manifesto. I'm studying all that stuff right now. Let's see. Recognize, honor, and self-manage your own emotions first. That's first. Because if you can recognize it in yourself, you can recognize it in others. And that is so valuable and important. That would be rule number 1. I think rule number 2, learn to create space for your employees, regardless of what they bring to you, be it emotions, problems, personal life, sickness, illness. Create space for it, because we don't just leave our personal life at the door. That is a myth. It follows us everywhere. So when I say create space, I have people curious about that. Be able to sit in it. And it's always a clear thing to me when a leader is uncomfortable with emotion, when they have an employee start to cry, the first thing they do is reach for tissues. If that employee needs tissues, they know where they are. They'll get it. You're basically telling them to dry their tears and cover it up. It's like telling your kid to, it's like telling your kid to go to your room when they start crying. I don't want to see that. Create space for it. Because if you're uncomfortable with, that's a you problem that you need to dig in on.
Yeah. That's an excellent point about it being a you problem, because we don't always think of it that way. So that's continue.
No, we don't. Yeah. And then I think once you're good with those 2 rules and you're able to do that, learn to create space in groups, be it your peers, your employees, as they start to bring emotion, because we all know as emotions go up, they heighten. But then also have enough self-management of yourself to know how to be that steady rock of emotion, to be able to bring them and level them out when necessary. You're the calm in the storm, I think is what I'd call that. Be the calm in the storm. And that's how you're going to really be the empathy model that you want to lead for your team. Because when you start doing that, and all of our teams have young, and I don't mean young in age, young in experience, people who want to be leaders, that's how you create new leaders right there.
It totally makes sense. I mean, it's like you always hear the cliches as you're coming up as a leader about leaders surround themselves with other leaders and people who can help push them. I think people underestimate the power of stuff like that.
Your employees and peers promote you, not your bosses. The faster you learn to work with your employees and your peers, the faster you're going to move up. If you're ambitious and you don't get along with your peers, can't stand to work with your employees, are terrified of you, you're not going anywhere. You're stuck. So start figuring that out.
Exactly. No, it's so true, because they're the people who work with you day in and day out and know you the best. And so if someone's looking at you for a promotion and they come and they just casually talk to your staff and nobody's really raw behind you, they're probably not going to offer you the promotion. Rightfully,
absolutely,
because it's your job. I always say that to my clients, your job as a leader is to motivate these people to do the role that you gave them with strength and power. They shouldn't be timid. They shouldn't worry about making decisions that are within their role of responsibilities. If you gave them a job description and included making a decision about X, then when a decision about X comes up, they get to make that decision. And I used to have people come to me all the time and say, I need to do this. Can I spend the money on that? And I ask them, is it in your budget? Yes. Your job's to control your budget.
Motivate them, not with pizza parties.
Right.
Like intrinsically motivate. I'll never forget that. Oh, they seem sad. Let's do a pizza party. how about we do a sensing session or a 360? Because I feel like something bigger is going on.
I can't tell you this will be, I think, episode 304. And out of all of those episodes, anyone who talks about leadership always mentions the pizza party. And it's, when you think about it, it's a sad state of affairs, because if everyone's mentioning the pizza party, it means that too many people are trying to do the pizza party thing.
And nursing, it's really bad in healthcare. I've worked across 5 different industries, and healthcare, our nurses, God bless them. I still teach in clinical engineering right now. And our nursing staff just, it felt like anytime it felt like it was getting heavy, and they had a lot of problems. It was a lot of process stuff. Like, you have people, process, technology. I keep saying that. Process stuff, and then you get the technology to automate it and all this. But they were missing that piece, and it felt like leadership was just hyper focused on the people. And it's, oh, they're having a rough time. Let's bring them food. And don't get me wrong, they loved the food, but it doesn't solve the problem. And then you see that turnover, and it's just a sad state of affairs. It really is.
This has been an amazing conversation. Why don't you let everybody know where they can connect with you?
Yeah, you guys can find me on LinkedIn, Rise Executive Coaching. Please give us a like and a follow. You can also visit my website at riseexecutivecoach.com. You can join our newsletter at the bottom of the homepage, or you can send me an email. There's a book it button, and send me an email if you're interested in bringing me in. I do free initial consultations. I'm a women-owned, disabled, veteran-owned organization. I was in the Army for 12 years and 2 deployments. And I don't just work with executives. Everyone sees executive in there, but I do leadership development. I do personal coaching. I also help heavily with military transitions and LLC small business creations. We were selected Best of the Springs this year for Colorado, here in Colorado Springs, for human resources and our work there with transitioning vets, and then Best of Colorado, which was a Business Choice Award as well. So happy to work with you guys, and feel free to reach out for a free consultation, be it one-on-one or for your company.
I encourage people, as a business coach myself, to reach out and get on these things, because it is like therapy for your career. People don't realize just how helpful it can be. Most leaders are somewhat analytical, and I think that it makes them think. Anytime I've ever gotten coaching, I'll be thinking about it for the entire next week until the next session. Then when you come back, you're able to take a step forward and another step forward. It might take a while to get to the ultimate goal, but you get there a lot faster than trying to do it on your own. So I highly encourage people to reach out. But thank you so much for spending time with me today. I truly appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and I hope to do this again in the future. If you ever want to have me. Hey.
Definitely. Again, thanks for being here, and everyone, thanks for listening. New episodes of Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another incredible conversation.
Thank you.